Hello, beautiful light, and welcome to another episode of From a Medium's Perspective. Today we've got quite the show for you. We're going to be taking a look in the first half of the show about past lives from a medium's perspective. And then in the second half of the show, I'm going to be sharing a past life memory that I had of being a ghost in a tale from the other side. And towards the end of the show, I have an interesting psychic development exercise that's going to help you develop your own psychic abilities and tap into past lives. Who are we? Who were we? And why would it even matter? Wikipedia says that reincarnation is the religious or philosophical concept that the soul or spirit after biological death can begin a new life in a new body. This doctrine is a central tenet of Indian religions, as in India. It is also a common belief from various ancient and modern religions such as Spiritism, Theosophy, and Eckankar, and is found as well in tribal societies around the world in places like Siberia, West Africa, North America, and Australia. Roughly about half of the world believes in reincarnation. And I'm quite sure that you've heard one or more of the several accounts in world news over the last few years of children that can accurately recall the details of their past life, and how startling that is to some of their parents who might come from a completely different religious viewpoint. It's just becoming a more accepted phenomenon. And I personally didn't believe in past lives for most of my life. Every time the topic would come up, I would say, well, if that's true, then this is my last one. I'm done. But then one day I had a memory of a past life, and then another, when I was with someone that I cared about. And I didn't know exactly where to put those memories because they were exactly that. They were memories of being with that person in other time frames. And it was a soul recognition. It was really tangible. And they were full-on memories, but it didn't fit my philosophical framework at that time. I was definitely me, and he was definitely him, but it was not in this life. And that's really gotten me thinking. In my readings, it's not uncommon during the course of a reading for a past life to emerge with that person because it bears some weight in their present life. I recently did a reading for a woman who chose to specifically investigate just and only her past lives during the session. It was kind of cool. I was excited, a little different than some of the others that I do. Not that that hasn't been a topic, but it was fun to have someone exclusively interested in that. And I touched in on 7 of her lives. And as we did, I would check with her and see if it was resonating with her and see if she was getting anything along with me. And these themes kind of began to emerge. The first was a fear of early death. In at least 3 lives as a woman, she had died before the age of 30. And it became such a theme that I asked her, I said, are you afraid of dying before the age of 30? And she said, I am. How did you know that? And we tied it together. Another thing was a fear of insufficiency and the ability to make her own path. She felt really helpless. And that had to do with the fact that in 3 lives as a man, she had either been a slave or a subordinate and very cruelly treated. And she had not described these feelings about her life before the reading. These are just things that emerged as the reading went on. And because she had been dominated without freedom of choice in so many of her lives, it left her with a feeling of lack and lacking personal power, of fear of the power that other people had over her in her life and were able to hold over her. She's now working on reclaiming her own power through the choices that she makes by identifying the fears that stemmed from these past lives and tying them to the things that were going on in the present those resonances and understandings of why she would feel the way that she was helped her to put things in perspective and gave her just a broader comprehension of why she was the way she was and what she had going in some of those past lives that might help her change those things if she mixed it up a bit, and that they don't determine how she deals with things in this life. But being able to see them from that perspective allowed her to let them go. And she's looking forward to embracing a long, happy, and self-empowered life now. Shakespeare's famous quote says, "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts." How interesting. In a past life, you might have been born and would have died as a different race, nationality, religion, social class, gender, sexuality, or even another species, an animal or a plant or a starseed. You'd have grown up, worked, longed for love, fought, suffered, prospered, overcome addictions, and experienced roles very different than the one that you're now living. And they're clues to what our past lives were in the physical, emotional, intellectual, and psychological parts of our personalities. Most of us have experienced the notable feeling of déjà vu. That's that feeling that at this moment it's happened exactly this way before, or that we've been here before, or that we've known someone. You might enter a house or building, for example, and you've never been there, or pass a landmark, or cross a bridge, or see a particular feature in the landscape, and yet every detail of that place is familiar. You even know if it were a house, what's in the next room and what's up the stairs. You have a feeling that you've been there before. Now, we can astro travel or remote view by projecting our spirits. And if it's done in the dream state, we might not have much of a recollection of that. But we can perceive other places and things, whether in the dream state or a trance state, or even in a light between sleep and wake state. And so it is possible that déjà vu could be the result of astral projection. Not necessarily, but it could be. Also, houses and places tell a psychometric story, a story of past occurrences, the tales of what happened within their walls or what happened on their grounds. And we can pick up those stories empathically and have their images projected on the screen of our third eye for us to see and understand their history. But what you feel and remember could possibly be a memory from a past life, and you know it because you were, in fact, there. So pay attention to where the emotions that you feel originate from. Is it feeling like it's part of you and you experienced it, or are you picking it up from outside of you near the boundary of your auric field, where you're experiencing it like the tale or story from another person or place? Is it a memory or is it a synchronicity with the environment? That will help you differentiate a true past life memory from a vicarious empathic experience. You can ask yourself, is it me or them? Because we are all connected and there can be some overlap. Back to the phenomenon of déjà vu specifically, psychologist Arthur Funkhauser has identified 3 subcategories of déjà vu. He calls them déjà vécu, and recognition of an event that you've already experienced or lived through. Déjà senti, which is a memory that's triggered by a voice or music. And déjà visité, a place so familiar that we feel like we've been there before. Now, I have something called pre-déjà vu, and maybe it's better known as precognition, but I call it pre-déjà vu because of the way that it occurs for me. And it occurs in the subtlest of gestures. I might be moving something from one side to the other or shifting something, or there might be a particular formation of people in the room or an arrangement of objects. And it's like a flash that signifies for me the beginning of a chapter with an individual, a job, or a situation. And I know that when I experience this pre-vu, that when the chapter closes, I'll experience the same flash again. And that's how it happens. It's like a bookend or a marker in time. When it comes to a close, that exact arrangement comes to pass. So that's what I call pre-vu, but perhaps it is precognition. One signifier of a past life that you might relate to is recurring dreams or nightmares. They have sometimes given us clues to past lives. They aren't memories of places or events that have happened in this life, but they recur. So if you have a dream that you have over and over and it's in another place, whether it's a positive one or a negative one, they can be reflections of past life experiences or traumas that surface while we sleep. Esteemed author Brian Weiss has identified some ways to recognize past lives. And besides deja vu, you might have vivid, detailed dreams of yourself at different times and places, yes, but you might also have talents and abilities, likes or dislikes that are very strong, maybe even phobias like not liking tight necklaces or tight neckline, or feeling very vulnerable in a dress, or if you don't wear 2 layers of clothing, or maybe a fear of snakes, things like that. You might be attracted to or have sort of an unexplained aversion to something. Perhaps you just have no interest in going a particular place and you have a great desire to go to another, or you're drawn to certain people or certain cultures, even if you've never visited them or met them. You might find that you're able to learn certain subjects or prepare for a profession more easily than others. For example, you might learn a foreign language that might come quicker to you, and for others it seems difficult. But for you, you just pick it up really easily. You might have a really deep fascination with particular historical times or events, or feel such a kinship or a familiarity with the people that have gone through them, maybe Egypt or the Civil War period. Brian Weiss also mentions that it's common to travel through different lives with the same group of souls. These are called soul groups, soul companions, or soul families. Some people call them soul mates, but I think that has become confused with the term twin flames, and we'll be talking about that in another show down the line here about twin flames and soulmates. We seem to learn our spiritual lessons and accumulate or resolve our karma with particular soul groups. And these relationships might change from life to life. Maybe you were someone's mother in one life and they were your son, and then in another life you were brothers, and another one best friends at arms, another one the roles are reversed, or you become husband and wife. Whether the relationships shift, the souls stay the same. And so our preferences, our talents, deja vu, recurrent dreams, our phobias or affinities for particular cultures or objects, people in our lives, all can connect us with our past lives and give us kind of clues as to where we came from. Now, I'm going to bring up a hypothetical correlation with past lives, and it might be somewhat controversial. I've never heard anyone say this specifically, although I did speak with another medium in a slightly related discussion about this. And I'm going to talk about dissociative identity disorder, and maybe you know it better as multiple personality disorder. Well, I have a personal theory, and before I do explain about that theory, I want to differentiate between 3 mental disorders that are known, and they do sometimes get confused. People think they're the same thing, and they absolutely are not. And those 3 things that get confused are bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and then dissociative identity disorder. the multiple personality, or DID. The clinical information that I pulled down comes from psychcentral.com. I'm not a clinician. What I get in my readings, I get intuitively. I don't have any training as a clinician in terms of personality diagnostics or anything. But I wanted to relate DID, the dissociative identity order, to past lives after I make sure you recognize which one I'm talking about. Just briefly from their website, bipolar disorder is characterized by alternating moods of mania and depression, both of which last weeks or even months in most people who have the disorder. People in the manic state of that have a high energy level, and they might have irrational beliefs about the amount of work that they can accomplish in a short amount of time. They sometimes take on 1 million different projects at once, but don't finish most of them. Some people with mania talk at a faster rate and seem to the people around them to be constantly in motion. After the manic mood passes, a person with bipolar disorder will often crash into a depressive mood, and that's characterized by sadness, lethargy, and by a feeling that there's not much point in doing anything, and can be severe enough to actually create thoughts of suicidality. People with schizophrenia, however, hear or see things that no one else can and believe things that aren't true. Their thoughts are kind of tied into a complex, irrational belief system. They might or might not be able to differentiate between their hallucinations and a clairvoyant or clairaudient gift, but it is possible. They do not have multiple identities or personalities. Now, people with DID or dissociative identity disorder don't have delusional beliefs outside of their multiple personalities or identity. The only voices that they express, hear, or talk to are those identities specifically. Within each of the personalities, they are completely rational and completely able to interact. It's just a different shift in personality. And it's my premise that some of those suffering with DID might be drawing on their other past lives that they've lived in, where maybe they were stronger or more capable and drew on past skills to cope with really horrendous situations that they've had to deal with in this life. Now, by no means am I suggesting that memories of past life indicate any kind of pathology. There is a specific difference between pathology and spiritual encounter. I'm just theorizing that it's possible that sometimes past lives might play a role in those that do suffer DID, that they might be tapping into several lifetimes within one and accessing identities from past lives in order to survive until they reach a point of feeling more secure in this life. I think that our interest in our past lives is because we have an innate interest in integration. You know, when we're in the etheric state, we're able to integrate all of our identities. We're not limited in our perception of who we are. It's just down here in the material plane that we become forgetful of who we were because of the purposes that we come here from. Now, we hear the term old soul and new soul. Those terms basically refer to someone who either has or hasn't been around the block a few times. And I mean by that, of course, people that haven't experienced many lifetimes or have experienced many lifetimes incarnate in the body. And I really liked the explanation that I ran across given by Michael Newton. According to many spiritual teachers, all human beings are in reality spiritual beings on a human journey, and we reincarnate as human beings in order to evolve as souls. Our ultimate aim is to become fully conscious and capable as unique and individual expressions of all that is. So it's a long journey, but that's okay because our soul is eternal. So how do we grow in consciousness? We grow through taking on challenging experiences in the physical form And these things cause us to make important and soul-searching choices and to call upon us to discover our most inner resources. But why would a perfectly happy spiritual being decide to inhabit the physical realm with all of its limitations and difficulties? And that's because we can experience the state of what it feels like to be totally separate from others. In the body, it's you and me. We're separate. And that also gives us a sense of separation from the rest of reality. Only by going into the physically separated human form can we know ourselves as beings in our own right. Being physical creates contrast for us in a way that isn't possible out of body. According to the teachings of the entity known as Michael that he channels, there are 35 steps to the reincarnation process. We go through 5 stages of evolution in reincarnation, and there's 7 increments or levels within each step. And he defines the 5 levels as infant, child, young, mature, and old soul. And as the soul goes through each stage, the focus changes. The more experience is gained and consciousness expands. Souls between lives exist in a light form, and each soul has a particular color of the spectrum, which indicates its current level of consciousness. The least evolved souls, the newbies, have kind of a pinkish hue. And the oldest, those that are nearing the end of the whole reincarnational cycle, have a bluish hue. So your preferences and interests can tell you a bit about yourself in past lives. What you're drawn to can be based on an experience that you've had before and realized, it's just not what it's cracked up to be. There are some other things, too, that are reasons that we might confuse a memory of a past life with an actual experience. And I'm going to go into those in the second half of the show because I think they're important. Anyway, if you do find yourself becoming highly emotional when particular bits of history are discussed, maybe the Holocaust, Hiroshima, the Underground Railroad, or you feel very excited when you tap into some of those things, or if you're drawn to a particular culture or have a desire to travel to particular regions of the earth, all of these things could be related to your past lives. I had an experience when I went to England to the Arthur Findlay College of Psychic Science, where there were some people talking about how much they recognized being there, like, oh, I feel like I came home. And I was sort of listening, and I didn't feel that. But when I went out for a walk one day, I ran across the stables, and boom, I felt like I knew that place. And I found out later that an ancestor of mine, William the Conqueror, had gifted the land on which Arthur Findlay College stands to one of the warriors who assisted him in battle. That brings up like an entirely different point, which is how do genetic memories differentiate from past life memories? Are genetics related to past lives? If you can't stand tight necklines, maybe that's because you were hung in a past life. Or maybe if you have a fear of drowning or heights, there may be a tie to past lives. Sometimes it is something different than that, maybe a trauma from our childhood. But we often do look to the past to figure out what's going on. And since we're multidimensional beings, we can go way back to find out why we are as we are. But how do you know if it is a past life memory or not? There are some things that might make us feel as if we had lived as another person before coming through the experience of others. I find these highly interesting to contemplate. There are 3 examples of this type of experience: collective consciousness experiences, life reviews, and the memories associated with them, and then something I call the history channel. We'll just take these one by one here. Collective consciousness, or being empathic or telepathic, is basically just the fact that all of us are connected. And we can empathically pick up information via sort of a mind meld or an energy meld with other people. One example of this I discovered on one occasion in a reading was when a thought form from a parent or significant other creates the impression of a memory that didn't actually happen to the person themselves, but they have experienced it vicariously through an empathic bond. An example of that would be that one of my clients' mothers had been sexually assaulted as a child. And as my client grew up and she began to approach the same age that damage had happened to her, which, by the way, she had completely blocked out. This was all at the subconscious level. When my client grew up and hit that age, my client started to wonder if she had been sexually abused. And as she grew, even though she didn't have any direct memory of it, she just had this weird question in her head, like, was I sexually abused? And it really bothered her because she didn't know. Of course, it's possible that we can block a memory of a trauma. And we do that because we're surviving mentally. It's sort of like a shock state. We basically go into denial and repression so that we can survive mentally and just be able to function in our life. And it particularly happens in situations of abuse within the home, but it can happen on the battlefield. It can happen in all kinds of situations. But in this case in particular, the client was highly empathic, and her mother's fears that the abuse that she had suffered as a child would happen to her were so intense that the mother's thought forms became embedded in my client's aura as a fear. So though in reality my client had not been sexually molested, she had vague fears that she had been just because of the intensity of the fear thoughts her mother was projecting toward her subconsciously. Like that example, the natural empathic and telepathic beings that we are, we pick up the emotions and thoughts of others. And it's really important that we discriminate the differences between what is genuinely ours and what belongs to another. Our life reviews are another way that we can experience life from another person's perspective. When we cross over, we have an opportunity to experience our life again. And that's what's called the life review. And I'm sure you've heard the expression, my whole life passed before my eyes, like when someone comes close to death. But the interesting thing about our actual life review is that we don't just see our own life, but we actually experience our life from the perspective of each person that we've spoken to or acted towards. And we feel our actions as if we were them. It's also confusing when you're trying to sort out which past life memories belong to you, because if you've experienced the feelings of other people that you affected in a past life as if they were your own, that's kind of a tangle of things to discern there. There's another way to experience someone else's life as our own, and it's what I call the History Channel. I learned of this place on the other side during a reading when my client's father, who had passed, came through. And he started talking about what he was doing over there, and he said he was watching the History Channel. And my client laughed and said that that had been his favorite TV station. But he wasn't talking about this dimension. He was talking about a specific place on the other side, sort of like a library. And you could go in and, for lack of a better way to say it, you could check out a DVD of sorts. The DVD was about another person's life. And the cool thing about the DVD was when you played it, you became the person that the DVD was about. You could actually experience the life of someone else. Let's say you'd been an admirer of Joan of Arc, and you always wondered what it would feel like to lead an army as a girl at the age of 17. You could start at any age. You could start any age in her life, maybe 16 and a half, and experience exactly what it was like. If you wanted to pass on the end of her story where she was burned at the stake, you could just stop the DVD before it got to that point. But you would have experienced the life of Joan of Arc. Maybe that's why so many people believe that they were a significant character in history, like maybe Cleopatra or a follower of Jesus. because once you watch something on the History Channel, those experiences become your memories. But we can remember. We can remember our true self and regain our past life memories. And there are several techniques, one of which I'll be talking about in the next couple of segments after this. But basically, we can recall them in a dream state or an altered trance state. In those states, we can remember who we truly are, who we have been before on this earth plane, in other worlds and dimensions, and who we are in all our beauty and fullness of our etheric expression. Because we have so many ways to connect to the memories of others' past lives and the experiences of others in our present life, hypnotherapeutic past life regression might not be the best method for recalling past lives. Hypnotherapy is really helpful when it comes down clinically to remedying phobias or treating addictions. And there are a few very gifted individuals that combine their mediumistic abilities with hypnotherapy. But in the spiritualist community at large, it's not generally considered to be a pure altered state because it relies, at least in part, on the suggestions of another party. And because of the many ways that we might have experienced life through collective consciousness, previous life reviews, visiting the History Channel, I really encourage you to do your own work or to work in tandem with a medium that can sort of energetically help you connect to the past lives that might be having the most influence on who you are or who you were. I did have a question by text to me, and she was wondering whether or not you could be reincarnated as an animal. And she didn't think so. The Brahmins in India do believe that, and there are many other people that do believe that sentient life can be expressed from any angle, any position, a leaf, a tree, a dog. And speaking of dogs, I did have a reading with a woman where her dog transformed into a Native American man and did talk about a past life that they had had together, being part of the same soul group and the changes that it brought into both of their lives. I think it's possible. So I promised you a story from the other side. I knew someone and always felt very close to him, and we always had a very natural rapport. One day, I just had this really detailed memory of him and I in a past life. We were traveling in the 1940s, and we stopped at those little hotels, and we went in. As the evening progressed, we began to make out on the bed, and we just kind of burst into laughter in the middle of a kiss because we realized that really we weren't sexually attracted to each other. We had a very platonic bond. And the next part of that vision came when I started looking for my things. It was like, where are my things? Where are my things? And I started asking people that were in our room, did you see my stuff? And no one was listening to me. No one was answering me, and it was kind of irritating me. I went outside, and there were children throwing apples around, just playing. But I got all indignant, thinking that was a total waste of good apples. I decided to reach down and pick up one, and my hand went immediately through that. As my hand passed through it, I realized, oh, whoa, I'm a ghost. Then, as soon as I remembered that, my memory shifted and opened, and I was back in the hotel room that evening that we had been there and was remembering a knock on the door. And I had opened the door, and the woman, actually his wife, had shot me in the face. And that's how I had passed. And as I remembered that, I was able to travel back to the man that I truly loved and tried to communicate with him, telling him that I was not unfaithful to him and how much I loved him. I think he heard me because he started to cry, and I ended up going into the light at that particular time. Past life memories are really interesting, and you might or might not want to delve into yours, but I recommend it. And now, to top off our show, I've got an exercise to do at home for you to help tap into your past lives. So let's get our psychic knuckles cracking. All right, so many ways to recall the past. Past life regression has to do with soul memory and soul travel. Past life regression is something that you can do yourself. Keeping it in a pure and natural altered state, I think, is probably the best way to roll with that. There are certain steps to working in the psychic dimension. First step is to clear the space. And you do that energetically with or without objects. You can use sage, whatever. The next thing would be to ground yourself, to connect yourself to the earth and to let go of your ego and your intellect. And then you would invoke the protection of your guides. You would specifically call in the highest vibrations to protect you and watch over you while you work. And then you would set your intent, in this case, to reach a past life. Then you'd start working in spirit. And when you're done, it's really important to close down your energies. The first thing is prepare your room. Make sure that you're comfortable and the room's comfortable, that the distractions are out of the way, etc. And you would relax your mind and seek a mental state of calm. You're going to relax your body as well. For me, I lie on my bed to meditate. Not very admirable, perhaps, but it works for me. And you just want to relax and make sure that your face is relaxed. That's one of the things that's important. And close your eyes and just get really comfortable. Just breathe for a while. You'll start to get some images. You can choose your favorite place to go in terms of a spot that you visualize that would be calm. Or you might keep it neutral for this particular exercise. Picture just a white enveloping light all around you. As that light shines on your feet and your legs and your knees and your thighs, your torso and arms, your neck and your face, your head, that white light protects you from all negative influences. You've already invoked the protection of your guides, so you're already safe and secure. They're not going to allow anything dark or terrible come through. You need to know, as you do recall things, that you have the authority to end a memory if it becomes uncomfortable for you. For those of you that haven't worked a lot out of body, the sensations that you experience could include buzzing, feeling kind of a vibration, or you might feel like you get really small, or you might feel like you start to travel. You might see your body below you. It just is different for each person, but you've set your goal at feeling a past life. Some people find it helpful to do the sort of countdown that you hear in hypnotherapy, counting backwards and going downstairs, or imagining a hallway and opening doors. But for me, I just like a freestyle blank space, that white light or those white clouds. And then you just allow your mind to wander and don't doubt what you receive, because you can be pretty sure that there'll be pieces of truth that can be deepened and elaborated. It's really allowing your mind space to receive that. And that might not seem very deep or very profound, but that's it. It's really that simple. And again, you can join someone that has a mature ability to work in spirit, to work with you. You can do it with a friend. And then just, as you bring yourself back, you can take notes as you see things, and then you bring yourself back to the present. And don't be discouraged if you don't get anything, or if you just get a little bit of something. It is a soul memory, so it's sort of like a different language. So be patient with yourself and allow your memories to become more vivid. They might seem fragmented, like a piece here and a piece there, or you might sort of tune in stronger and stronger and stronger as you get more and more information. But gradually they will defragment or define themselves in a more specific way. Don't forget to ask your guides to open those possibilities. Well, this show has just gone way too fast for me. I hope you've enjoyed it. I certainly have. In our next episode, we're going to be talking about life after death. And I'll be sharing another tale from the other side, and we'll have some other things to help build your psychic abilities. And I thank you for joining us. You can visit my website at mediumtracylockwood.com. That's Tracy with an EY. Or friend me on Facebook at Psychic Medium Tracey Lockwood. See you next week for a view of life from a medium's perspective. And remember, it's never inappropriate to be kind, and without integrity, you have nothing.